All right, for the lesson to reteach, we're going to be looking at both parts of the lesson. The first part's just looking at proportion and ratio word problems. So number 1, Mrs. Byrne ran 7 miles in 59.5 minutes. How many minutes would it take her to run 2 miles? So the first step is we are finding the 2 units that are being compared. So I'm always looking at that initial sentence, that initial ratio. I see miles is our first unit. So I'm going to write that in here. And our second unit that I see is minutes. And you'll notice that on the ratio, or on the proportion here, we already filled that in for you. So our first unit was miles, our second unit was minutes. Step 2, circle the 2 initial numbers and fill them in the first ratio, the initial ratio. So that's 7 and 59.5. They should be right by where those units are. So 7 is referring to miles. We put miles on top. 59.5 is talking about minutes. We put that on the bottom. All right, next step, step 3 says circle the other number and corresponding unit given in the problem. So if I look at the second sentence, it says how many minutes would it take her to run 2, and I'm circling the unit that's with it, miles. So then it says fill that number in the second ratio or the end result. So 2 is miles. We put miles on top. So our 2 is going to go on top, which means we are solving for the minutes. And if we look at the problem, it says how many minutes. We don't know the number of minutes. So now I'm going to go ahead and multiply to solve my proportion. So I'm going to multiply 59.5 times 2, which equals 119. And then I'm dividing by the number that's in the same diagonal as the variable, which is 7. So 119 divided by 7 is 17. So what unit were we solving for? Our x is on the bottom, which is referring to minutes. So we were solving for the minutes. All right, next one. Joe mows lawns during the summer, his summer vacation, to earn money. He took 14 hours last week to mow 8 lawns. At this rate, how many lawns could he mow in 49 hours? So step 1, again, we're finding those 2 units that are being compared. So it kind of talks about it a little in the first sentence, but if I look in the second sentence, it says he took 14 hours, so that's our first unit, hours, to mow 8 lawns. So lawns is our second unit. And if we look at the proportion that we already pre-filled for you, we already have the hours and the lawns in there for you. Step 2 is circle the 2 initial numbers and fill them in the first ratio, that initial ratio. So it should be by our units, 14 and 8. So 14 is talking about hours. We put that on top. 8 is talking about lawns. We put lawns on the bottom. Step 3, circle the other number and corresponding unit given in the problem. So the third number that's given to us is 49, and the unit that goes with it is hours. Hours was put on the top, so we're putting 49 on the top, which means we are solving for the lawns. And if we look at the question, it says how many lawns. Now we have a proportion that we can solve. So the 2 numbers that are in the same diagonal, 8 and 49, are the 2 numbers in a diagonal. We're going to multiply those, so 8 times 49, if I multiply that, is 392. And then I'm dividing by the number that's in the same diagonal as the variable. So I'm dividing by 14. And we get 28. What were we solving for? X is on the bottom, which was talking about lawns, so 28 lawns. All right, one more of these proportion word problems, and then we're going to go to the next part of lesson 2. Joshua bought 8 video games for $124. How much would he pay for 20 video games? So again, step 1, let's identify those units. So I look, Joshua bought 8 video games. So video games is the first thing we are comparing. For $124, even though you don't see the word, we see the symbol there. That dollar sign is talking about money. So that pre-filled out proportion down here already has that. Video games and money. Third step, circle the other number and corresponding unit given in the problem. So if we keep reading, how much would he pay for 20 video games? Actually I skipped step 2. Circle the 2 initial numbers and fill them in the first initial ratio. So 8 and 124. 8 is talking about video games, which went on top. 124 is next to the dollar sign that's talking about money, and we put that on the bottom. Now going to step 3, where we're circling the third number given to us, 20 video games. Video games was on top, so we put 20 on top, which means we are solving for X on the bottom, which means money. And it asks, how much would he pay? That's talking about the amount of money. So now I'm going to highlight my diagonals. And we're going to multiply. The diagonal that has 2 numbers in it is the pink diagonal here. We're going to do 124 times 20, which is 480. And we're dividing by the number that's in the same diagonal as the variable, which is 8. So if we divide that by 8, we get 310. What were we solving for? The X is on the bottom. That's talking about money. So $310. All right, so that's just looking at the proportion word problems. Now let's look at just ratio tables. So it's basically a similar idea, except your information is given to you in a table. Joey Chestnut won a hot dog eating contest by eating 66 hot dogs in 12 minutes. Complete the table with equivalent ratios. So if we look here, we again filled out the proportion for you. We have hot dogs being compared to minutes. And same thing in our table. It's all preset for us. We see that initial ratio is already given to us. 66 hot dogs, 12 minutes. So we're going to fill in from our table. We're going to find that initial ratio, which is the one that has 2 values, not just 1. So that 12 and that 66, we're going to fill it out here. So, except this should be flipped around. Sorry, this should say 66. This should say 12. So we're going to fill that in here. The 66 hot dogs and 12 minutes. Complete the table with equivalent ratios. So we're solving for this. The 2 is referring to minutes, which we put on the bottom here, which means this right here is our X we are solving for. So I'm going to highlight my diagonals, and we're going to solve. The diagonal that has 2 numbers in it is the yellow, so we're going to do 66 times 2, which is 132. And then we're going to divide by the number that's in the same diagonal as the variable. That's the 12 right here. So divided by 12 gives us 11. What were we solving for? Our blank is right here, which is where the hot dogs are. So 11 hot dogs. And one more. To make cranberry jam, you need 12 cups of sugar for every 16 cups of cranberries. Complete the table with equivalent ratios. So, the 2 units, they're given to us. We filled it out already in the proportion down here. We've got sugar is the first thing we're comparing, and then we have cranberries is the second thing that we are comparing. Our initial ratio that's given to us in the problem here, the 12 and 16, is given to us in the table. So from the table, we are picking the initial ratio. It's the one that has 2 values in it, not just one. So 12 is for the cups of sugar and 16. Now we're just filling in here. The 4 was on the bottom, so we're going to put the 4 on the bottom here, which means we are solving for x. If it's easier for you to do that, do that. Now we're going to highlight our diagonals and solve. The diagonal that has 2 numbers in it is the yellow, so we're going to multiply 12 times 4, which is 48. And then we're going to divide by the number that's in the same diagonal as the variable, which is 16. When we divide 48 by 16, we get 3. What was that referring to? We were solving for the sugar, the cups of sugar. And that's